Yeah, just waiting for you guys to show up. Hopefully somebody's out there. It's been rainy weather around here. I like cloudy weather though. There's nothing wrong with a little bit of shade. It's hot. We're in summer now again. Looks like we got somebody out there. Welcome to the show. I, Lorraine, yes. I was going to say, I hope it's Lorraine because there's other people. I'm not even going to mention their names. We don't want to. We don't want to do that. That I don't want to show up. So yeah, isn't that suck? How you're minding your own business as a targeted individual, and people got to mess with you. I can't do a live stream without the shield, when I'm not going to go off on it. Well, it looks like we've got a few people. So I think I'm just gonna quit wasting time and start chatting. That turn off that cheesy music anyway. Yeah, it's kind of gloomy weather around here. I don't mind the shade. It's been hot. We've been in the 80s where I am, and I don't know. It's nice to cool off a little bit, but with the humidity, it's still really hot around here. So anyway. But we're going to talk about some gang stalking. We're going to talk about covert techniques, workplace harassment, neighborhood harassment. We're going to touch on a lot of things. We're gonna move through a progression here. Hopefully, I'll be able to stay on for a while. We've been having some electrical problems with the storms, but you just never know. Let's see if I can get that. Well, looks like we got a nice little friendly crowd so far. And guys, if I don't pay attention to the comments, don't worry about it. I'm just trying to avoid getting distracted, and we're going to talk about that too because gang stalking. Yeah, they use distraction, they use manipulation, they use a lot of different techniques. And it's been a while since I've done a live stream. Oh, my phone's tweaking out. Wonderful. And I had to change my diet. I was having health problems. In fact, I mentioned that on one of my live streams. I didn't know what was going on. My heart was beating. I was having a hard time breathing. So I made some pretty serious life changes. And I was also accused of not going to the doctor. And I never said it was gang stalking anyway, but whatever. It could have been. There's some pretty weird stuff going on around here. I'm not even going to mention it right now. But I thought, I better change my diet and I better do it drastically. I mean, I was experiencing, heart palpitations. I was having a hard time breathing. And I went to the doctor several times and he's like, oh, you seem to be fine. And I've talked about the fact that a lot of psychiatry is infiltrated internal medicine. Okay, it's infiltrated the physician office. I mean, big pharma has just put their fingers in everything, and it's more than that. Okay, and it goes beyond just money. And I've talked about that before with psychiatry. And by the way, I'm not an actual doctor. I've had people ask me that. Okay, I'm by default. I think that's how you phrase it. De facto. By de facto, I've become my own doctor because I just can't find one, man. I mean, I've had to be my own doctor now for decades. I cut my own hair. I'm pretty much my own doctor. Definitely my own counselor. Um, my own preacher. I've got a lot of titles. But getting back to the point, if you're saying a psychiatrist or whatever, I'm not telling you that they're out to get you. I'm not saying they're bad people, but there is an agenda. Okay, not everybody out there who's involved in psychiatry or psychology is bad, but there is an obvious agenda, and it is used not only to discredit targeted individuals, but I think just regular people. because I mean, look at all the disorders that are out there. And by the way, I've got documentaries on my playlist. I've mentioned them before. One of the shortest ones, if you're one of those people that can't watch long documentaries, is Psychiatry's Covert Agenda. And there's other ones. I think there's some that I posted that have to do with the adverse effects of some of the psychopharmacological drugs that are out there that are being pushed, and some of the drugs have just been relabeled. Man, I mean, it flips from one side to the other. So you'll have people who are having side effects to their medications, and they might be for physical ailments, and they'll take them off the market, they'll relabel them, and they'll start selling them to people with psychiatric disorders, or they'll do the vice versa. And it's pretty yeah, it's pretty shady stuff. But like I said, I'm not telling you to do anything. And if you need medication, there's nothing wrong with that. I've taken things to help me sleep before, drugs for anxiety. You got to be real careful. My only suggestion would be to research what you're taking. A lot of the people that I've talked to don't even know the medications they're on. I don't know, like 5 medications. What are they? I don't know. And it's like, man, you check those out. Check them out. A lot of them can have some pretty adverse effects. I think I've referenced some of that stuff before. But anyway, it is infiltrated medicine. But when I went to the doctor, he's like, "Oh, you're fine." And so I'm like, "Well, that's not working." And I asked him if I could get an inhaler, you know. And he's like, "Yeah, but maybe you should go see a psychiatrist." I said, "For what?" "Oh, just in case there's an emotional component. I mean, you did get in a vehicle accident a while ago, and now you're having trouble breathing." And I said, "No, I think it's probably a health issue." But anyway, good news, guys. I went on a real strict diet. We're going to talk about that a little bit too, because the stuff that they're feeding us, the stuff that they're putting in our water supply is just, oh man, I mean, really? You guys know about all that. You've looked at the fluoride conspiracy. It's supposedly for your teeth, and I'm not saying that there's any evidence that's it's affecting your pineal gland or whatever, and causing some type of psychological effect, other than it is obviously proven to dumb people down. Okay, which it looks like it's worked. I don't I don't drink the city water. I haven't for years. I can't remember the last time I took a sip out of a faucet. I may have rinsed out my mouth with it at the dentist office last time but I won't. Yeah, no, it's gulag stuff. And of course, then they protected the water plants by passing the water bill, which makes it illegal for citizens to sue the water plant because they were paying heavy fines. A lot of people threatened with lawsuits. They didn't want them putting that stuff in, and it's toxic. It is. It causes cancer and a bunch of other stuff. But getting back to dietary issues, and I probably lost 20 or 25 pounds, and all the added sodium, getting back to targeting. It's not just, even with the psychopharmacological drugs, that's not just going after people who consider themselves targeted individuals. It's everybody, and the food too. I mean, doctors are not talking about the dietary issues. Big pharma is making a killing off drugs. You got type 2 diabetes. It's prolific, and we've got all kinds of things going on with the preservatives, um, and all the added sugar. That's probably the worst right there. And I'll admit that I was indulging in a lot of sugary foods, but I mean, everything's got added sugar. Everything has got a ridiculous amount of sodium. And I'm going to tell you this, guys, after 2 weeks of getting rid of all the processed foods and just, going real strict with the diet, fruits and vegetables, all the whole foods, zero processed foods, zero added salt, zero added sugar. And I could breathe fine after about 2.5 weeks. Everything pretty much disappeared. I did some other changes I'm not going to mention as far as what was going on in my dwelling. I did say there were some weird things happening around here. But, it really, made me feel a lot better. And I would suggest that you guys examine what you're eating. If you're eating processed foods, it is literally killing you. It's nasty stuff. The fact that people have diabetes at such a young age now is not a coincidence. And all that added sugar is giving people fatty liver. It's adding to a lot of different problems, and it's putting people into a state of obesity because they're insulin resistant. And your cells are literally burning sugar instead of fat. So you're storing fat, you're getting all that added sugar, you're all that, and your body is storing fat, but it won't burn it. And if you're like me, the thing that I was experiencing is I'd eat a pretty healthy meal, and I was trying to, just eat maybe 2 meals a day or whatever. And I thought, well, that'll make me lose weight. I even went down to 1 meal a day. And I thought, well, that's not the issue, because you're getting all that added sugar, you're getting the unhealthy food, and then you're hungry right after you eat, and it's because your body's out of glucose, it's out of that sugar, and it refuses to burn the fat. And so it takes a while for you to get into that place if you're one of those people that's having a hard time losing weight. Um, yeah, it takes a while. Get on the keto thing. I got rid of bread. I'm not saying that whole grains are all bad or anything, but you get into some of that stuff and you get a lot of, sugar byproducts in your. But anyway, like I said, I'm not a doctor, but just an update and an issue, because how you feel psychologically, what you're doing to be productive, and the areas that you can do something as a targeted individual, you're being boxed in. They want to limit your social life. They want to limit your ability to earn money. We're going to talk about that with the workplace harassment. And gosh, I hear targets all the time. I watch videos out there. I don't mention names, and a lot of them have just gone into disability, which sometimes you have to. Okay, that's not a bad thing. I'm not criticizing anyone, but you want to try to avoid it, because I mean, not only are targets, uh, you know, being outnumbered, they're being ganged up on, obviously, but the resources, they want you to have nothing, right? They want you to be completely stuck and at their mercy. And when you can't earn a living, that's one of the things they attack. They go after you at work. A lot of targets experience the disinformation campaigns and the infiltrating shills at work, and they'll get in there and they'll cause trouble. I've seen it. Okay, I've been dealing with this stuff. My gosh, the workplace harassment started real heavy back in, I think it was about 94, and it was just ridiculous. You were yeah, you're dealing with aggressive attacks, obvious stuff, because that was pretty much when this whole thing went overt for me. I think it was around 93. And they just came out of the closet. And, a lot of people talk about that. Are they paying people to go to your place of work? It seemed like it, man. I mean, just from observation, it seemed like there was something like that going on, because people talk about that in their neighborhood too. You hear target individuals talking about what's happening in their apartment complex or their neighborhood or whatever. All of a sudden, people start acting funny, or you'll see them snooping around your property or whatever. Um, yeah, yeah, it's. I think it's fair to say that there are people who get paid, or they'll just manipulate people. That I've heard of that too, where they'll pretend like they're cops, or they'll say that they're working, for the government, and this person is a deviant or whatever. I think there was one video where a guy was talking about the fact that, and I think it was on Targeted Individuals United, where his neighbors were told that, he was some kind of a freak, not to use his bathroom and stay away from his property and all this stuff. And, he was absolutely a good person. As far as I could tell, this guy is a legitimate targeted individual. It's just a bunch of disinformation, it's a bunch of propaganda, and they will do that. And so they will get people to harass you just with that. And that's, it goes into the social coercion aspect. And people are manipulated that way. And I've talked about the social dynamics that are involved because, you know, very few times have I seen a group of people with a social structure that didn't have a scapegoat. Okay. It's glue that holds people together, especially a big social group. Workplace is like that too. There's a lot of stress involved with work. There are a lot of things that go on, and targeted individuals are put in that place of a scapegoat. People just vent on them. Okay, and it's out of convenience. And even if people are not being paid, even if there's not some kind of infiltrating shield that comes in, some type of agent that starts causing trouble for you, just the things that happen to targeted individuals can make them vulnerable. And I've talked about that, especially new targeted individuals, because they're looking around, they're trying to figure out what's happening, they're trying to, figure out what's really up. Who's after me now? Right. And they're listening to conversations, they're making eye contact, and unknowingly they're drawing attention to themselves, and that can cause trouble. I've talked about that before. If you're in a scenario at work, or if you're out in public and you're experiencing heavy targeting, try not to make eye contact, man. Try to just completely mind your own business, to the point where people got to come up and kick you in the rear to get your attention. Because like I said, it's very easy for new targets to get caught up in that, and it's like a virus. It's like a disease. I remember when I first started getting directed conversations at street theater and all that, I was always listening to say, I wonder if they're oh, I can, I'd walk into maybe a store or something where I got harassed, or at work or whatever, and my ears would just be ready for whatever was happening. I was always anticipating. And that's what they want. They want you to be anticipating this stuff. They want you to be flinchy. They want you to be negative. Eventually, you're going to be pessimistic and bitter, right? At first, you're just trying to figure out what's going on. You're just trying to process the information. But then it becomes like a disease. And I've talked to a lot of targets that they're like, I have to put on headphones, which at that point you might as well. There was a guy I used to talk to up in Canada, and he said that, on his commute to work, people he didn't even know, strangers, they would come and sit down next to him and start playing this game, and they'd start talking about stuff, personal information, right? That only he would know. And they'd make it obvious. And at first, and that's where the gaslighting comes in too, guys. At first he's like, well, I don't know. Maybe it's a coincidence. And, you kind of wonder that, because they'll divvy this stuff up. And, if you're a new target, or you're someone who's been hit with a lot of that, and you get that disease, you can become triggered and read into something. Okay. But so this guy, he's like, well, here's what I'm going to do. I don't know if these individuals are, trying to gaslight me or play with stories. I'm going to put on some headphones and, even try to leave the geographical location inside. I think he was, doing some type of subway thing, or maybe ride the bus. I can't remember, but they would follow him, right, and get loud with it. So they were trying to talk over, the music or whatever he was listening to. And, I always talk about that. You want to make them work as hard as possible. You don't want to let them gaslight you. Ultimately, they want you to think you're nuts. Okay, they want to drive you crazy. Right? They want you to be reading into things. They want you to have that mind virus, that disease, that paranoia, to where you're triggered all the time. They want to use that traumatic invasion to basically sensitize you to the environment that's around you. And it's just like the headlight stuff, the red shirt stuff. And I've seen that people, oh yeah, there was a red Coke can, and they'll use all these things, whether it's whistling or keywords or whatever, man. And they will sensitize you, and then they'll just, wind you up like a top and watch you go, and they want you to be your own worst enemy. And so, the distractions, the methods to get you into that state, they want you to be emotional. So after they traumatize you, after they get you sensitized to all these things, of course, then they just want to trigger you all the time, because they want to they want to try and gaslight you into making you internalize all these things that are running through your mind. Because, before all this stuff started happening to you, you weren't worried about it. You weren't paying attention to the things that you're sensitized to now. There was a guy out there, I think it was the Iceman Cometh. He's got a video where he talks about sensitization. He wasn't even paying attention to that stuff, right? Now he's, noticing it wherever he goes. It's like when you buy a car or something like that, then you start noticing, oh, there's, you wouldn't have noticed it before. I've seen that on videos. People are looking at the colors of vehicles. They are looking at the headlights. You got to quit paying attention to this stuff, man. Eyes straight ahead. And I think I made a video about that a long time ago. I called it Cyborg, which it was kind of a joke, but at the same time, it's serious. And you got to kind of disconnect from all these things that are around you. Okay. You want to try, like I said, to just, be in a state where if someone's talking around you, I can do it now. I mean, you have to come up and literally tap me on the shoulder or I don't even care anymore. But, I've been doing this for a long time. Okay. And they will, though, they'll get obvious with you, and that's what you want. Okay. You want to make them work. You want them to be obvious because ultimately they want you to believe you're crazy. They want to gaslight you. And then, if they do trigger you or draw you out, they want to get you going, right? They want you to be frustrated, to get you down that pathway where all those associations that they've created are bothering you. And even more than that, emotions that go along with stalking. Okay. Because it's not just whatever they've sensitized you to, whether it's whistling or keywords or whatever, or behaviors. There's a lot of things that they can use. It's not just that. It's all the associations that are going to go along with it. And they're not good. Okay. And I've talked about that. That's the traumatic invasion into the mind of a target. And then you start going down that road. Even after you're out of the situation, you're kind of stuck mentally. Okay. And, after work or whatever, after you get out of the establishment where you experience the harassment or wherever it is, you're kind of grinding away. You're thinking about that. You want to try and stop that as well. But the problem is that those associations, those negative emotions are connected to that stuff. And it just puts you in a funky frame of mind. I mean, you're experiencing depression and anxiety, right? And that can lead to all kinds of things, hopelessness. And then you start, going down memory lane. That's another problem that can happen to targets because they're so isolated, finding people that are targeted individuals to hang out with is getting harder, in my opinion. It seemed like, and I could be wrong because I've just kind of tapped into this targeted individual community for, I don't know, the last few years. But it seems like the infiltrators are getting trickier. It's like they're honing their techniques. They're becoming very, very subtle, and they're playing the long con. And I've noticed, I've talked about that. There's some of them out there on this channel that I've noticed for quite a while. And they'll play little games. Oh, I love your comment or whatever. Or, oh, that helped me out. And they'll give you positive strokes. And then they'll come in for the kill. They'll play the long con and they'll try to get your info or whatever. And I'm not saying that you shouldn't get a hold of anybody. I'm just saying be careful. And it seems like it's harder to find someone to communicate with. And of course, there's a motive behind that because they want targets fighting each other. They want them divided, and they also want them isolated, right? Conquer and destroy. That's what it is. And, that's another issue that I think a lot of targets, I can see why people have a different, view of gang stalking on an individual level than maybe other groups or cliques. But you know what? It's okay if someone else is on a journey and they are learning things or they believe something that's different than your view. Okay. You have to agree to disagree and be friendly about it. They want people to divide. They want people fighting. They want people attacking each other, and that's really the modus operandi of the stalker. They want to turn you against yourself. They want the TI community to turn against each other and just keep everybody isolated, dysfunctional. They want to take you into a place where you are starting to really feel the effects of harassment. Isolation is deadly, you know, and I deal with it. I've been dealing with it for decades. It's one of the worst aspects of gang stalking. It's horrible, you know, and everybody needs affirmation. That's another reason why I make these videos. Okay. And a lot of people, why are you talking about this? Or why are you talking about that? Or why do you repeat yourself? Because there's a lot of new targeted individuals that are coming in and they need to hear that stuff. They might not want to go through all my videos. They might not understand what's happening, or they'll be sensitized to something. Also, I've been accused of messing with people before that I knew what was happening, maybe in their personal life or in their dwelling or something. I don't know who you are. I have no idea. Or maybe it was just a shill technique. I've noticed that too. A lot of times, I used to know a guy, and he said that they would play that game with him. Oh, you're a stalker. You're one of them, and that kind of got the dialogue going. And then once you kind of come to an agreement, uh, you're really off guard at that point because you're not expecting that person, because they're the paranoid one, right? They're the ones that you're just trying to comfort or whatever. I don't know, whatever. But there is a lot of that, and it seems to be getting harder for targeted individuals to get linked up. Targeted Individuals United. I like that channel. It's interesting. Um, I personally, when I hear people talking about confronting uh, perps and stuff like that. There's a there's a way to do it, and there's a way that you have to be careful. Okay. And it's like that in every aspect for targeted individuals because they want to draw you out, man, and they will use that stuff as bait, right? Because if people are telling, I mean, how many, put it this way, what percentage of the population really knows about this type of covert harassment anyway, right? I mean, that's a good question, isn't it? I've talked about that before because I mean, look at the stuff that targets deal with. And then you get into all this hive mind theory and you get into the neural monitoring. I just made a video about that, or you get into the demonic stuff or whatever, or you're dealing with the social dynamics. But really, even if someone knows about it, they're not going to admit it, right? And you're going to be sitting there, if someone doesn't know, in other words, they're not going to believe something like that, man. The last thing they would even want is to believe something like that. If you tried to, even if they had proof, they wouldn't want to know, right? That the world is that crazy, right? That someone could experience the stuff that you deal with as a targeted individual, right? They don't want to think about that. They don't want that kind of mental baggage to deal with. But when you start trying to explain this stuff, you're dealing with both of those. It's both sides of the coin. You either have someone who's in on it, they're going to draw you out, they're going to make you look crazy, they're going to get you emotional, they're going to trigger you. You're trying to expose it, you're trying to deal with it, you're trying to stand up for yourself, but it works in their favor. Yeah. And I've noticed that. You get people, and I hope this stuff does get exposed. But what my advice would be is to be very careful how you do that. Okay. It's like right now, I'm talking about gang stalking. I'm doing a live broadcast. I make videos, but I'm not going to write a letter to the governor. Okay. I'm not going to try and contact a fusion center and accuse them of having my name on a list, because what's going to happen, or, even in a more reasonable scenario, like maybe your neighbor is harassing you or whatever. Okay. And that happens. What do you do? Do you tell them, hey man, uh, I know what you're doing and you're a stalker? Well, I don't know. I mean, that's a tough call. How do you deal with it? Well, you try it. For me, I'm just going to be honest. I don't say anything. I try to win people over, and my strategy would be to kill them with kindness to the point where if they are going to attack me, I want to make it as hard for them to do psychologically as possible, right? I want to be as friendly to people as possible. The last thing a target needs is more enemies. Okay. And then it does happen. And I've dealt with it, man. I've been dealing with it for years. And I've actually won a few of them over, guys, where they apologized to me. I've talked about that before. I had one guy break down in tears. I was going over to his house. I was, hanging out with him, being nice, giving him beer, giving him food. Oh, you need some help, man. Oh, you need a ride, man. And this dude just broke down finally. And he apologized to me. He gave me a little information. And he said, these people, you don't know what they'll do to me. He goes, you don't know how mean they are. And I go, yeah, I do. And I think all you guys don't too. I think some people are coerced into this thing, but get back to the point. You want to make it, because the last thing you want to do is start, crying that the sky is falling. And then, you're going to draw in the cops. Okay. You're going to draw in the landlord thing. You're going to draw in people to get involved. And then, of course, what's going to happen? Okay. The authorities are going to get involved. You might even have to go to an evaluation or something like that at a psych facility. You don't want that kind of stuff because they want you to get on paper. They want you to start talking about this stuff and trying to fix it yourself. And remember, you're outnumbered, man. Remember the game that you're playing. Remember, how sophisticated this stuff is. It seems primitive. It seems, random, but it's very scientific. And when a target gets attacked, and they try to stand up for themselves, they try to confront the perp, they try to remedy the scenario or whatever. There's a lot of things that could go wrong, and you don't want that. You do not want attention from the police. You do not want, if you want to write the governor or the senator or the president or a fusion center or the CIA or something like that, I mean, more power to you, but I'm just warning you that when you do that, things can start to, there's a chain reaction that begins when you go after a neighbor, when you go after someone in your, work environment or whatever. The chain of events are going to be predictable. Okay. And then you're left trying to explain this stuff, and it's unexplainable. If you're a targeted individual who's experiencing higher forms of harassment, the last thing you want is to try and explain it to either of those parties that I talked about, either someone who doesn't understand it or someone who's in on it. And that's your only two options. Okay. And, that just gives them an edge. And then they have the opportunity to make you emotional. And then you look even nuttier. Oh, you're having symptoms. Oh, you better go take some medication, and that's the last thing you want. My advice would be to be, someone who is just, you don't notice anything. You're like that cyborg. Your eyes are straight ahead. You're not making eye contact. You're not looking for anything. You're going to notice what's going on. You're going to be aware of your environment. You're going to realize that you are being harassed. And that's what you want. Because I'm going to tell you this right now, especially if you're a new targeted individual, if you get the over the top, obvious type of harassment, man, thank your Lord and Creator, because they will play games for years that are so subtle, and a lot of targets, they do experience that type of gaslighting, and they start wondering if they're, nuts. They start wondering if they are hallucinating. They start wondering if the disinformation and that gaslighting campaign is just something that is a symptom of a mental illness. And then, you're in that place where you're being defeated, right? You're going to start buying into it. And I've seen that happen. But there's two things that can happen at that point. And sometimes, the target is going to experience the symptoms, or I guess more accurately, the stalking will kind of taper off a little bit. And I've noticed that before. And I've referenced that guy I went to Alcoholics Anonymous with, I think, gosh, it was back in the 90s. And he ended up in a mental institution for a while because he tried to, remedy the scenario. He confronted people. Um, and of course, when he got to the facility, he explained to the doctors what was happening. Right. Of course, they said he was schizophrenic, and they put him on a bunch of medication. And they said that the reason he was having psychotic symptoms, they even took it into the area where they said, well, the reason you were losing your mind is because you believe in the Bible. You believe in hell, you believe in demons, you believe all this weird stuff. And that's really what is happening to you. And that's just a symptom of your mental illness, too. And so he walked away from Christianity. You don't want to do that. Okay. They will do that. And that's just proof of the evil, spiritual side to gang stalking. I've talked about that before. You can't isolate this stuff to technology. There is both. There is technology and there is the spiritual aspect of gang stalking. Okay. And I don't care if you're one of those people who is just being harassed in a geographical location and you're not experiencing it like other targets who are getting it everywhere. And you might be dealing with, just a group of people who want to play God with you. But I think that at the root, they're being motivated demonically. Okay. But people get into that. And I've talked about that. I made videos about the secret societies, about the demonic stuff and the occult, and stuff that's going on in the government, because it's a chain of command. Okay. And when targets are experiencing higher forms of harassment, they're dealing with it all. And you try to isolate it and you get into, hypothetical technology. But, and like I've said this before, I'm not against technology because I believe that technology comes from the spiritual dimension. I believe that that's where we're getting. And when you get into, the book of Enoch or so forth, when you get into studying what happened leading up to the flood in Genesis, when you get up to what happened after the Tower of Babel, and you get into the seven-headed, ten-horned beast of Revelations, where you have Egypt, Assyria, Babylon, Media, Persia, Greece, Rome, and I believe Ottoman Empire is the two-part final contingency that we're going to be dealing with, but that's another subject altogether. Um, the chain of command starts there. And when targets are dealing with all this stuff, they'll start looking maybe, at the Freemasons or at the Illuminati, maybe at the Scottish Rite. They'll start looking at, government, things like the CIA, MK Ultra. It's all there. Okay. It's all connected. All these things meld together, and that's how they work. You have to look at the logistics of this stuff and process that information correctly. And, when you start isolating that, well, it's going to confuse targets. Okay. And I've also noticed that the shills are very resistant against the spiritual application. Okay. I don't, people are in discovery mode. A lot of people don't understand what's happening to them. They don't understand what's going on, and that's okay. I'm not gonna, attack anyone or say you got to believe what I believe or whatever. I'm not going there. But what I'm saying is, when you're dealing with a shill, when you're dealing with a disinformation agent, whether they're trying to, obfuscate the reality of the technology that's being used, whether it's, voice to skull or directed energy weapons, microwave weapons, and some of the other stuff out there, um, they're going to do the same thing with the spiritual dimension. Okay, and they're gonna mock it. They're gonna, oh, you're talking about demons. Oh yeah, yeah. Well, you cannot separate your existence from the spiritual aspect of this. Like I said, though, there are a lot of people who are in discovery mode and they are just finding these things out. But when you get into the logistics of gang stalking, when you're dealing with all this stuff, is it possible for everyone to be hooked up with the CIA? Is it possible for everybody to be hooked up with the Freemasons or the Illuminati or what? That's when it really starts to fall apart. And then you really see the pyramid structure. You really see the chain of command that you're dealing with. And targets, they deal with it. And it's crazy. It's all encompassing. And I've talked about the dimensional perspective before. And, am I speculating? Yeah, I don't know everything. I don't have a magic crystal ball, but I know what I've experienced. Okay. And I know what's going on in the occult. And it's everywhere out there. Even if you're one of those people that's just kind of, flipping through here and you're like, well, this gang stalking stuff sounds crazy. Now we're talking about, the demons, with a dimensional perspective who are setting things up in advance. And well, look at what's going on in astrology. Look at what happens in soothsaying because it's the same thing. Okay, when you get into that stuff, there's plenty of evidence of it out there. I've used the example of Paul and Silas in Philippi plenty of times. They got thrown in prison because they cast a spirit out of a soothsayer, and she was making a lot of money for her masters in that area. And you could read that one in the Bible. That's a pretty old account, but you get into palm reading and some of that. Well, that's just the shotgun technique. Yeah, there are people out there that are fakes. Okay, but there are real accounts of where maybe even the FBI has gotten a hold of a psychic or a psychic has gotten a hold of the FBI and literally given them information that solved crimes that nobody ever would have figured out. Okay, stuff like that. How does that work? Well, it's because of that dimensional perspective. It's because of if in my opinion, I look at it as time dilation. Okay, but a lot of people call it divine manipulation. There's a lot of different ways that people look at it, but targets deal with that. I mean, I've heard stories from people where they get somewhere and it's like people are waiting for them. How do they know I was going to be here? Or people will, deal with that type of clairvoyant harassment where it seems like their minds are being read. Okay. Well, is that what's going on? It could be an illusion. Okay. You could be dealing with information via the spiritual dimension, and they just, they kind of have a little bit of I don't know, a future perspective on what's going to happen. They're variables speculatively. I'm not saying you should go around and be paranoid about that, but it does explain some of the stuff that targeted individuals are going to be dealing with. And I've heard of that. I think Zev Daniels has mentioned that before, that it was like the hotel rooms that he was going to were pre-wired. People were waiting for them. I was listening to a testimony, I think it was yesterday, where this person had traveled way out of their geographical location, and individuals were waiting literally at this hotel for them. And it wasn't long. I mean, and there's a lot of speculation. People say, well, no, they've got ways of tracking you. And so that is true. There is technology involved. They can do that. You can put a GPS tracker. You can track someone through their phone. There's a lot of things. You can watch their habits. You can kind of try and predict what they're going to do. But targets that are experiencing higher forms of harassment, they're going to be dealing with that. And I think the spiritual application becomes a lot more reasonable at that point. That was my point. Taking a look at some other stuff here on this list. Okay, what else have we talked about? That talked about the workplace harassment, getting distracted. Um, you know, the zero reaction principle, call it whatever you want. That's, other than just being nice to people, trying to make it harder for them psychologically to attack you and just not reacting because you're killing the gaslighting. You're not playing into their bait. You're not becoming emotional and getting called out where people are going to say you're nuts. Okay, you're having a reaction. You're displaying psychotic symptoms. You're getting angry. You sound insane, right? That's the last thing you want to get drawn into. Okay, it's zero reaction principle, whatever you want to call it. I just kind of came up with that. Is going to be effective for doing that. Okay, because at the end of the day, you have to look at what you're going to actually accomplish by reacting. Okay, and there are times where it's okay. There are times where you do have to stand up for yourself, but you have to be smart about it. You kind of gotta try and get them to paint themselves in a corner, right? Because, like I said, the idea of harassment is to get you emotional, to get you into that state of trauma, to gaslight you, to put you into those associations and in a mental state where you become dysfunctional and start to go into that downward spiral. Okay. And it's tempting to buy the bait, and they will try to bait you. Okay. You might be dealing with things in traffic. You might be dealing with harassment at your workplace. You might be getting baited by trolls online or whatever. It's the same. Okay. And when you use that, non-reactive principle, they have to work harder because there is a motive behind this stuff. Okay. And I've talked about the spiritual vampirism and stuff like that. But at the end of the day, they're not going to be able to do that unless you let them. Okay. You do have power. You have authority to do that. You might not be able to control what other people are doing. You might not be able to control, your workplace environment or what's happening in your neighborhood. But with that principle, with being kind to other people and just treating them the way you want to be treated, by living a good life, by being a good citizen and not giving anyone any, reason to say anything about you, right? And not reacting, well, you're going to be doing a lot more, in my opinion, to counteract the effects of gang stalking. You're going to be frustrating them. You're going to be stifling their methodologies, and it's important to do that. It's important that you try to, give yourself as much room and options as possible. Because when you start attacking people, when you start confronting them, when you start trying to explain gang stalking to individuals who are in on it or individuals, who don't know anything about it, your options just start dwindling away, man. Because if you don't say anything, you know the it's wide open. You don't have to do anything. You don't have to try to explain yourself. And a lot of it is directed towards getting the target to try to defend themselves, in the sense that they're gonna, when a target becomes dysfunctional, when they get attacked, when they experience sleep deprivation, when they're experiencing covert drugging, we'll get to that too because that has a lot of effects that are similar to V2K. But when you start experiencing the effects of harassment, it's hard to concentrate at work or whatever. You're going to make a mistake. People try to call you out. They'll try to bait you. They'll use accusation gaslighting. And now you're tempted to say, well, yeah, but you don't know what I'm dealing with. Okay. Oh, really? Well, what are you dealing with, by the way? Oh, well, I'm dealing with gang stalking. What's that? Oh, I'm being hunted down by a secret society, or I'm being attacked by the government, or I'm being attacked by people who are being influenced demonically, or whatever. However crazy you want to make it sound, because it does sound nuts. Okay, and I've talked about that before. If I would have never experienced gang stalking, man, I would think that people were probably eating a little too many Fruit Loops for breakfast. Okay, because it's wild. And that's when, now that I've mentioned that, that's when when people come through the channel or they start harassing you in the comments or whatever, if they do it maybe once, maybe twice or something, maybe they're just someone, who's never experienced it. Maybe they're just someone who doesn't understand what you're dealing with. But if they keep on it, if they keep coming after you and keep trying to provoke you or draw you out or get you emotional, get you to try to explain what's going on, you know that they're in on it, man. They know. And the only reason they're doing that is because they want to manipulate you. They want to get you emotional. They want to call you out. They want to shed light. And there's ways to kind of scope out who you're dealing with. Okay. Now, I mentioned that we were going to talk about the covert drugging, and I forgot I was going to talk about that, because there's a lot of people that are talking about V2K, and I know it's real. Okay, I've made videos on it. I've talked about the sound to ear, whatever you want to call it, man. When people they get so picky on the terminology, the nomenclature. I'm just trying to communicate with you guys, and I'm going to use words that you understand. Okay. When you're hearing things and it's obviously coming from somewhere other than a legitimate audio stimulation or whatever, That's sound to ear, voice to skull, whatever. Okay, now when you're dealing with maybe methamphetamines or other types of drugs, hallucinogenics, LSD, stuff like that, people get drugged with that. Okay, there's other things that can happen to targeted individuals when they're experiencing a lot of sleep deprivation too. Okay, and you can start hearing things then. And the other thing is that, the strategy for V2K or sound to ear or whatever you want to call it is to kind of ingrain that stuff in the target's mind and get you thinking in patterns. Okay. It's like hearing a song on the radio. Just imagine, and they did that with MK Ultra, by the way. They would play things over and over, and they would give people drugs, LSD. They would use sleep deprivation. They would use all those things in conjunction, and then it's ingrained in your brain. Okay, so if you're one of those targets who's experiencing that stuff, and you're like, I left my geographical location, I tried to go out in the country, I tried to get away from all this stuff, and it was still there, man. Maybe it was a satellite. Well, maybe it could be the effects of covert drugging, or if you're into, using, that could be something too. And a lot of times it might take years for that stuff to kind of completely go away. I've talked to targets before that were using methamphetamines to try and boost their morale or other drugs, and even marijuana. Not everybody processes that stuff as far as their physiology the same way. It's fat soluble, and it could build up in your system. And so there's people that can smoke marijuana on a regular basis without experiencing negative effects, and there's other people that it will literally be like schizophrenia. Okay, it will build up in your system, and the pot they've got out there now is so strong, man. I mean, it's between 20 and 40% THC. It's really strong. That could be another explanation, but like I said, they will try to ingrain that into your mind, and it's just going to be kind of reverberating around in your brain. Okay, and that's one of the techniques and methodologies that they will use. So if you're still experiencing that, or if you go out in the middle of the country or whatever, you're trying to get away, or you're building a Faraday cage, or doing whatever you're doing to try to eliminate the possibility of electronic harassment, and you're still experiencing symptoms, you could be dealing with something like that. You could possibly be dealing with covert drugging, or just the reverbing effects. I guess that wasn't the right word. Uh, of the harassment that you've been subjected to, right? The reciprocal effect. Sorry, and that could happen. It's just like when you get a song stuck in your head, or you will, start answering back. Isolation mixed with V2K is very deadly. And so it's like they're reprogramming your brain, guys. They will use drugs. They will use voice to skull. They will use harassment. They will use sleep deprivation. They will use isolation, and that's what they want. Okay, and I've talked about that, man. Just getting a person in those circumstances can make someone start hearing things. They want you to go crazy, and they want you to believe that either you're responsible for all these things that are happening to you, and you have to take the blame, like somehow you could have prevented it. That's another little trick they use. Or they want you to believe that you're mentally ill. Okay. And the best way to tell if someone is genuinely trying to help you is to see if there's any compassion involved in what they're doing, because a lot of times people will come along and they won't understand what targets are dealing with. But you can tell that at least they have compassion, at least they care. Maybe they do want to help. Then there's other individuals who are just going to be cruel, and of course you know who they are. I'm not going to mention. um, and that's obviously gaslighting. Okay, so if you're getting accused, a lot of people will deal with that from family members, believe it or not, on a very high percentage, and you'd think it'd be the opposite, right? They're using you as a scapegoat at that point. They're gaslighting you. They're venting on you at the very least. Okay, and at that point, you kind of got to just tune them out. That's really the only thing that that really works, because a lot of times targets will be stuck, maybe in a neighborhood, maybe in an apartment complex, or even in a house with people who are harassing them. And you just got to tune them out. And it might not seem realistic, but I mean, what else do you do? And, when you combine all these things together, you're dealing with homelessness, you are dealing with, people who obviously have had to leave the workplace environment and get on disability because they can't deal with the harassment or the effects of their electronic harassment, and all that other stuff is just so much that they can't perform at work. Forming relationships has become almost impossible. The isolation is unbearable. You know, I mean, all these things are a toxic soup. Okay. Climbing out of all this, what I would say is, if you're really that boxed in right now, and I know there's probably people at the very least that are going to listen to this who have been boxed in like that, start with something very simple. Okay. Something that you have control over, that you can focus on, that you can improve your situation. I don't care what it is. I don't care if it's dietary. I don't care if it's just, maybe getting up and, wiping off the counter, sweeping the floor, going for a walk, maybe, driving out in the country if you have access to a vehicle, and, just getting in a place where there's fresh air, where you don't have to worry about, hearing, directed conversations or whatever. Do something simple, something, and just kind of build off that, and then change your modus operandi, form protocols to deal with harassment instead of reacting. Try to, maybe if you want to join the workforce again, if you're one of those people that want to get out of the disability grind, well, look into some things that that you might be able to do if you're still lucky enough to be living in, you know, somewhere other than under a bridge or something. Because a lot of times targeted individuals will be driven to homelessness. If you're living in an apartment still and it's livable, or you've got a dwelling or whatever, you have access to something like that, you might be able to work online. I just deliver food for DoorDash and Uber. Um, there's still workplace harassment involved with that though as well. Okay. But I mean, whatever. But you're still able to escape. You want to give yourself as many options as possible. You know, Start with things that you have control over, and then just form protocols to deal with the situations. And that way you don't have to think about it. And I've talked about that before. When you have a protocol to deal with something, you're not hopping from one foot to the next. You're not trying to figure this stuff out on the fly or trying to solve it. That's another trick that they will use, is that game dynamic, because you're outnumbered. You don't have the resources to deal with this stuff. And what they will do is get you into that to where now you have to internalize, uh, losing this game that you're playing, right? Because that's what they'll do. They want to introduce as many emotional factors as possible. And when you introduce the ego into something, and you get somebody to feel ashamed, or you get someone to self-loathe, or to internalize this stuff with, a lot of targets will be hit with things from their past. Okay. And personal information is widely used in street theater and workplace harassment, because they want you to be traumatized. They want you to internalize this stuff and to believe that it's your fault. Okay. They don't have the right to do this stuff. And they will use that. They'll use that. They'll use the game theory, or whatever you want to call it, the little game dynamic, because then, they've got you playing their game. You want them to play your game. I'm going to just take a look at the comments real quick, because I've been jabbering for quite a while. Yeah. Uh-huh. Oh, yeah. Yeah, guys. Yeah, you know what? I'm going to stay away from the comments, because there's something else that I've been trying to avoid. Not to mention the fact that I had to give up caffeine. Whether you believe that or not, the way I've been talking. But I'm sure Double Fitzpatrick is out there. How you doing, honey? I hope everything's okay. There's another channel that I just came across a little while ago, and it's called Another Good Creation. You guys might want to check that out. It's a little shout out to Jasher. He seems like a pretty good guy, solid target. Um, I get vibes off of some of the channels, and if I don't mention them, that means that stay away from them. But I think you should check his out. He seems like a solid targeted individual. I do enjoy watching targeted individuals united. I think the testimonies are very interesting, and I think it's a place where people can get together, and you might even be able to find someone that you can connect with or relate to. Um, I think it's the problem that we run into in the targeted individual community is that people start to disagree on something, and you know what, man, that's okay. That's okay. Well, let me see if I've forgotten anything here. Gotten a few topics got through here. There's one final point that I always make, and I always end my videos usually with this, and that is that these people are not going to get away with this stuff. Okay, they are going to answer for what they are doing. They're not going to just, obfuscate their activity, get away with this stuff. You're not going to fade out into obscurity where everybody thinks you're insane. And, you just weren't able to, I don't know, be a regular citizen because that's what they want. They will use that strategy against targets. And a lot of times they'll call people out. Oh, why aren't you married? Or, why don't you have a better job? Or, what happened here? What happened there? You know what? You're dealing with a lot. And like I said, these people are not going to be getting away with this stuff indefinitely. They are going to answer. They're going to be dealt with. And, the scary reality of that is it's, from what I've read in the Bible, and I hold to the biblical criteria, it's going to be worse. These people, what they've done to you, that's small potatoes compared to what's going to be coming at them if they do not repent, if they don't stop what they're doing, if they don't wake up and see the light. It's coming back, and it's going to be worse. I don't know how much worse, but it's going to be bad. Okay. And I just want you to remember that. Like I said before, treating people with respect, even though they don't deserve it, is going to work out in your favor. Not reacting, not being confrontive in a way that's going to draw you out and hurt you and give them access to putting you on paper or getting the authorities involved. It's important to remember that stuff, guys. Okay, because I think a lot of targeted individuals have failed in that area, unfortunately, and I think some of them are still in jail. You got to watch out for that. But these people are going to be dealt with. Well, guys, be good to yourselves. Be safe.